Part 5. Travel up to Minehead. The path officially starts in the town of Minehead in Somerset. Like most small coastal towns in the West Country, it's a seaside resort that thousands flock to each summer. However, it's a little more famous than most because of the Butlins holiday camp that's been part of the town since 1962. British holiday camps like Butlins are an eclectic mix of campground, motel, resort and childcare provider that became exceptionally popular after the 1938 Holidays with Pay Act made it possible for industrial workers to enjoy family holidays for the first time. At first, these camps were purposefully designed to have no frills at all and only offered basic accommodation, set meals and the type of collective fun that would remind most of us of school sports days. That way they remained accessible to all and quickly became the go-to option for most families until the rise of cheap package holidays to Europe in the 1990s. In fact, the first time I had gone to Minehead was for a Butlins holiday back in the 1980s. By that time, the amateurish brand of entertainments that defined these camps in the 1950s and 60s, for example knobbly knee and glamorous grandma competitions, were a thing of the past, having been replaced by video arcades, ball pits and a modern swimming pool complex. Nevertheless, it still retained the unquenchable hidey-high spirit that made these camps both charmingly authoritarian and quintessentially British. In fact, I can still remember chasing a Butlins staff member dressed as a pirate around the lazy river with a group of other kids, all screaming and waving light-up toy swords at him. I'm pretty sure it was an organised event rather than a spontaneous outpouring of childhood psychopathy, but it was the 1980s, so who knows. Other than engaging in pre-adolescent forays into piracy, my older sister tells me I spent most of the trip nagging her to take me on the cable cars that crisscrossed the park, or diving headfirst into the ball pits that bookended most of their soft play areas. Given how young I was, my own memory of the trip is a little hazy, but it sounds like the sort of thing I would have done. Either way, it was the first family holiday I can recall in any sort of detail, so it was nice to be going back to Minehead. In order to get there from Weymouth, I grabbed the train up to Taunton and then got the number 28 bus from the station. Thankfully, I'd allowed myself plenty of time to get from one to the other, as I spent about 45 minutes waiting at a bus stop opposite the train station's parking structure before a passing staff member informed me that, despite the signage, I was waiting in the wrong place. The correct stop was in fact a 2-minute walk from the station and lay just under a bridge that looked as if it was being held together by rust and dust mites. Mercifully, the bridge didn't collapse while I was standing under it, and after a reasonable wait, the bus came along and picked me up. I had considered asking a friend to drive me up, but given the arseache it would have been for them to drive back, public transport was the best option. In fact, despite our fondness for complaining about it, the public transport in the West Country is actually pretty good. It'll get you to most places you want to go, even for day or section hiking, and if you're flying in from overseas to do a through hike, it's definitely the best option. Once I arrived in Minehead, I got off the bus at a stop halfway down the high street, and from there it was only a few minutes' walk to my hotel. As the official start point of the South West Coast Path is only a 10-minute walk from the town centre, a lot of hikers choose to start their hike as soon as they get to Minehead, and then camp the first night. But I wanted a good night's sleep before setting off, so I decided to stay over. Plus, simply being at the start of the path after almost 9 months of planning and preparation had sent me into overdrive. To say I was buzzing with excitement would be a massive understatement. Honestly, there was a good chance there was more adrenaline in my bloodstream than hemoglobin at that time. So if I'd started the path that day, I'd probably have walked straight off a cliff without noticing. Bottom line, I needed a night to get my head on straight before starting. When you come for your own through hike, I'd recommend you stay over as well. Not only will this give you the chance to rest up, recenter and enjoy the town a little bit, but you'll also have the opportunity to sample some proper Somerset cider. It's been said that Somerset is to cider what Belgium is to beer, and I wholeheartedly agree with that sentiment. Every county in the West Country produces its own varieties, and each will claim theirs is better than the others, but there's no hiding the fact that cider is as closely associated with Somerset as beef is with Texas or croissants are with France. Now, when I say cider, I don't mean anything that's sweet or fizzy, and I certainly don't mean unfiltered apple juice. You don't pour it over ice, and you certainly wouldn't give it to a child to drink. West Country cider, or to give it its correct name, scrumpy, is unfiltered, very tannic, and very alcoholic. It's a funny sort of drink, really. I've had nights where I've drank nothing else for hours on end and woken up fresh as a daisy, and others where I've had 2 pints of it a little too quickly and lost the ability to either walk or speak with any degree of accuracy. It's basically like the best sort of West Country woman. She'll make you feel wonderful as long as you treat her with respect, but take the piss and she'll have you on your arse before you know what's happening. I'll tell you a bit more about it later, but I highly recommend you give it a go at some point. Now, if like me you do choose to stay in Minehead for a night or two before setting off, there's plenty of hotels and B&Bs to choose from. However, in true West Country style, I chose to go for the cheapest one I could find. At the time, this was a Wetherspoons named the Duke of Wellington. For the uninitiated, Wetherspoons, or Spoons as it's known to most, is a chain pub that's pretty much ubiquitous in the UK. Almost every town has at least one, if not 2 or 3, and they tend to stir up a variety of mixed feelings. On the one hand, Wetherspoons is about as unpub-like as a pub can get. They're not cosy or homely, there's no music and usually very little atmosphere. When you sit in one, it feels more like a fast food restaurant than anything else, and the man who owns the chain is an absolute... well, if you can't say anything nice, don't say anything at all. On the other hand, they've usually got a wider range of real ales and craft cider than a lot of other pubs, and you don't have to remortgage your house to drink there. Whereas another pub might charge £4.50 for a pint, you can get the same in Spoons for about £3, and even though the food is mostly microwaved, it fills you up and it doesn't cost the earth. My room was one of the few singles they had, and other than being hotter than most saunas, it was perfectly comfortable. So, after dumping my gear, I headed out for a walk around. I figured it was probably a good idea to do a bit of a recce of the town and locate the official start point before the following day. So, I set off down the high street and went for a wander along the seafront. The fish and chip shops were there, as were the amusement arcades and the faint aroma of burnt candy floss, but it was smaller than I remembered, which I suppose is to be expected. I checked out the new Butlins and got a little jealous when I saw how much nicer it looked compared to the 1980s, but that soon subsided once I saw the mass of people milling about. It's not that I don't like people, I just don't like people in large crowds, especially when those large crowds are made up of large families. For some reason, people in crowds seem to lose any sense of spatial reasoning and common sense. Suddenly they start gathering at the narrowest points in any thoroughfare, walking 5 abreast at the slowest speed possible and screaming at volumes that would deafen heavy metal guitarists. Plus, as a teacher, I've got a blanket policy of staying as far away from other people's children as much as humanly possible when I'm not at work. So, I decided it was best to make a tactful retreat away from Butlins before I cracked and did something I'd later regret. You know, like covering a family of holidaymakers in chips and letting the herringgulls do their thing. After extricating myself from the throng, I headed eastwards towards the official starting point. The path officially starts about halfway up the promenade on the western edge of town and is marked by a monument depicting a pair of disembodied hands holding a map outlining the path on the front. It was designed by an A-level student named Sarah Ward as part of a competition held by the South West Coastal Path Association, and then sculpted by an artist named Owen Cunningham from Derbyshire before being erected sometime in 2001. Honestly, they couldn't have chosen a better design for the monument or a better spot to place it. It captures the spirit of the path perfectly, and seeing it for the first time definitely brought home the scale of the challenge I was about to start. That's pretty much all I got up to that night. Once I'd located the start point, I returned to the hotel, ate a steak, drank a few pints of Thatcher's Gold, and then went back to the room for a decent night's sleep before heading out the next day. And that's what I'll tell you about in the next update. Take care.